And here we are in episode 44.
Yep. How's everything?
Yes, pretty good, thanks. As I mentioned offline, I'm actually going to be doing having a trip to Japan in the near future. So that's going to be exciting.
Well,
Asking
yeah,
to
yeah,
visit.
I'm absolutely envious. I haven't been to Japan since my family got here. So, yeah, I never had a chance to resources or anything like that. But yeah, enjoy yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my first trip to Japan, just be there for a couple of weeks.
Gotcha.
So I've got a few things to talk about. Myers-Briggs. So there was a 1 week delay, which was my request. I was just flat out with a bunch of stuff. But Myers-Briggs, and I've got some stuff on nuclear power,
Mhm.
and also one Australian woman that I want to mention. So I guess we can kick off with Myers-Briggs. So we did actually briefly talk about this before. So what I find really interesting about this, I've had a little bit more time to look at it now, and there's some information on Wiki for Men. What is actually, I think, is really interesting about this is there's quite a gender difference in terms of certain Myers-Briggs types. And when you start to really look at it, it seems to me, it's interesting what everyone else thinks about this, but looking at it, it seems to me that many of what you might almost call stereotypical male and stereotypical female characteristics, the type of things we would often associate with men or women, do seem to align quite well with certain Myers-Briggs types that are overrepresented in each gender. And I really do. Really got me thinking about this in terms of exactly how much of these sort of characteristics do come down to these sort of personality types. And of course, I think this explains quite a lot. I mean, you've got a lot of women who may be acting in a particular way, for example, but then you've got other women who will be acting more in a manner that one might generally expect a man to act.
Yeah.
I've been quite vague there, but uh, if you look on Wiki for Men, I've got the data there. It's quite interesting actually, and there's now, as we said last time, there are some people who in fact, Wikipedia calls Myers-Briggs pseudoscience. Um, but really, if I've had a look at what's going on there, and it's actually only been since February 2024 that that's been the case on Wikipedia, and there are quite a lot of people arguing behind the scenes about that. But yeah, it really does seem to me that, and this is a big problem with Wikipedia. There's a few people who've really got a set on it, and they've decided that that's what's going to appear on the page, and they're protecting the page. This is something we see quite a lot.
Hmm. Yeah, and we know what they think about anything that is pseudoscience. Anything they don't like is a pseudoscience.
Exactly right. That's right. Yes. Now, what I do find particularly interesting is when you actually analyze the data too, it seems to tie into male variability, which is something I've talked about quite a lot in the past, that it does appear that in the Myers-Briggs types, women are clustered, a majority of women, or a very high proportion of women, are clustered in a smaller number of categories, while men tend to be more spread out, which is consistent with male variability. And we know personality is actually one of the areas that's been proven otherwise as well, is one of the areas that is subject to male variability.
Right. I'm noticing that females cluster into like about just a few of them pretty specifically. ISFJ is like the biggest one I'm seeing in our Wiki for Men in terms of percentage for females.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. Followed by ESFJ, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
So I think it's F. If you look at the top four categories for women are all in fact they're all SF actually. So yes, in fact, if you look in the next one down, I've got called process pairs. So that's something that they've been looking at it in the Myers-Briggs organization itself, and they talk about the two middle categories being lumped together and drawing some interesting results from that. And yes, if you look at the next one down, 56.3% of women are actually SF, which is interesting. Now, there are men still, the ST process pair has 41.7% for men. So that's still quite high, but not nearly as high as we see with the women.
Right. Yeah, to be sure.
Yeah. So anyway, I do think it's quite interesting. It's something I'm going to dig into quite a lot now. I do think there is an interesting correlation male variability, and also an interesting correlation with the what people generally perceive as being fairly typical behaviors for men and women.
Yeah. Very interesting.
It is. So I think I'll probably talk more about that on a future episode, but I did actually manage to complete those tables today, actually not long before we started started this session.
Yep. So for those out there, just type in Myers-Briggs type indicator or just Myers-Briggs in our wiki for men, and you should be able to find what we're talking about.
Exactly. And in fact, MBTI we'll get to wiki for men. MBTI. There's a redirect in place. Now I wanted to talk about nuclear power. So this is something that's quite interesting. It's quite topical in Australia at the moment. So Australia has a considerable uranium reserve and also thorium reserve, actually. So the United States also has, I think, a fairly sizable uranium reserve, but a very large thorium reserve. Canada has very large uranium reserves as well, and I think probably also thorium, although I actually don't recall if I've ever checked that one. Anyway, Canada obviously uses nuclear. The US uses nuclear. Australia's been allergic to nuclear power for a long time, which is quite funny considering our massive reserves. In fact, we have something called the 3 mines policy, where they're only allowed to have 3 uranium mines at any given time. And the government sort of issues a license. They only issue 3 of these licenses for anyone to have a policy. But for the first time in my life, a political party, the Liberals, who are the more conservative of our two major parties, although not very conservative, but the more conservative of the two, are taking it on as a serious issue, which is a serious policy, which is the first time this is really, as I said, certainly in my living memory, the first time. I don't think even anything happened when I was a small child, but certainly, within my living memory, it's the first time we've seen it from a major political party. There's been quite a groundswell in the community of people who are interested, but never enough to get it across the line, I suppose. But of course, this is also running in parallel with the fact Australia's getting nuclear submarines in the near future. We're actually going to be buying some from the US. I think there's going to be US and UK submarines based here within a few years. Then a few years after that, we'll be getting some secondhand ones, and then eventually there'll be new ones here. So it is interesting. I think for the first time, perhaps Australians are taking nuclear bit more seriously, which is really good. But that's only part of what I wanted to talk about with nuclear. I wanted to mention fast breeder reactors. Now, have you ever heard of fast breeder reactors?
Well, we've been talking about it, so that's basically the extent of it.
We did briefly mention it before. That's right.
Right, yeah. I mean, I understand that a breeder is basically something that generates more fissile material than it consumes. That's really the basic thing I put into my head when I was looking into this. So
exactly, that's right. And I believe the fast comes from the use of fast neutrons to do this. So what I find really, and that sounds really weird when you first hear it, it produces more fissile material than it consumes. It makes it sound like a perpetual motion machine, doesn't it?
Right.
But it's not the case. It still requires, I think it's because it's a different sort of fuel. But that fuel can actually be put into another reactor, right? But what's really interesting about fast breeder reactors or breeder reactors in general is that you can take existing waste and actually feed it in as a fuel and actually get more energy out of it and reduce by about 99% the volume of material that's actually that you're actually storing. So I find it really interesting that over decades of people saying, what are we going to do about the nuclear waste? Now, I've known about breeder reactors since I was probably about 10 or 12 because I was interested in this sort of stuff. And I was really excited actually back then, about their development, but nothing ever happened for various reasons. But whenever you hear people talking about what to do about nuclear waste and all this nuclear waste the UK's got stored and the US has got stored and so forth, breeder reactors never come into the discussion, and they are a solution to this problem. You can use it as a fuel source for a breeder reactor, and reduce the overall material that you've got stored. Not completely eliminate it, but you do get rid of most of it. So a few years ago, there'd been rather an absence from me looking at this topic of several decades, and I wondered why breeder reactors never took off. Because as I said, when I was a kid, it was a very exciting area, and I was looking forward to that that useful technology coming online. It never did. So it seems that there are two reasons that I know of. There might be more. The first one is that fuel turned out to be uranium fuel turned out to be cheaper than was expected, which is interesting because one of the anti-nuclear arguments that's put forward is the fuel is expensive and difficult to get. Well, if that was true, breeder reactors would have been developed. The fact is that there's such vast supplies currently available. There's actually a fairly sizable amount of uranium in the ocean too that nobody's bothering to get out. But there are various sources of uranium available, and the fact that this is available means that we've never had to develop breeder reactors, or at least I can't clarify. There are a few around, but they've never been widely deployed. There is a second reason why, and that is I've got to concede this is quite a significant reason. You have to. There's a more enrichment involved, and there's a concern, I think, that that it may make it easier for bad actors to get access to nuclear materials for dirty bombs and even nuclear bombs and so forth. So that's a valid argument, but I think there are certainly ways that we could protect against that.
I see.
But I do find it interesting. And I've also got down, I made a note to talk about Chernobyl, actually. Oh, so I saw the series recently, actually, for the first time.
Did?
I don't know yes, I really liked it, actually. So that was great. Yeah, it's interesting that there was a known design flaw, and because of the Soviet system, it was essentially hidden. That's fundamentally what the problem was, of course. And it was hidden, and so Chernobyl, the design flaw was unintentionally exposed at Chernobyl. And combined with some other things going on, that's what caused the accident, I think, is their argument. But of course, modern reactors, a lot of people I still keep encountering people who are talking about these sort of problems with Chernobyl and saying we could see something like that again. But modern reactors are much safer than this, and they have all sorts of additional protections in place. Anyway, I don't know what your thoughts on that are. I mean, are there any reactors in your area? I don't think so.
I'm not really sure. I never really vastly researched the subject. So yeah. But it's definitely something that's kind of mired with, like panic. I think like every so often you see somebody who goes on to be an activist against nuclear power or something like that, because it's like it's going to blow up the planet and so forth. That's their mindset basically on this one. But my understanding is that it's actually much safer than is touted, and much safer now than obviously it used to be. Yeah,
Exactly.
so I'm not worried in such a way that these people are.
I mean, if you look at some of the Canadian CANDU reactors, which are actually quite an old design now, they've been around, I think the earliest ones may date back to the 60s or something. They're extremely safe reactors. And modern reactors also have various protections in place, like one of them I know is with the molten salt that can occur if you've got too much heat in the reactor, it actually melts a plug, and you can have the entire thing basically drain into a storage container underneath the reactor. You have to junk the reactor, but at least there's no, it doesn't blow up or anything. And that's only if you had a worst case scenario. In reality, the types of reactors we've had for the last few decades have been very safe. I do think some people obviously got a scare with what happened in Japan, but my understanding is that with Fukushima, there were a number of problems specific to Japan, and not just the fact that it's tectonically active. I think, from what I understand, there were a number of other problems specific to Japan.
There had to have been.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, Germany got rid of their started to decommission all their nuclear reactors after Fukushima, even though the problems that were occurring in Japan really didn't apply in Germany. And now, of course, I don't think they can recommission the nuclear reactors, but they are recommissioning some of their coal-fired power stations. So they would have been better. Yeah, they would have been better off if they'd left the nuclear reactors in place.
Yeah, it's pretty. You'd think that some of the environmentalists will kind of, look to a better solution than going back to coal, I guess.
I agree. I think that that's right. If you're moving towards renewables, which I think is a great idea, as long as we can maintain baseline power, right?
Yeah.
I would have thought using nuclear for baseline would be a great idea, or at least as a component in the mix. And yet, yes, the environmentalists and green groups in many countries are vehemently against nuclear, including here. As you say, I would have thought it would be a much better option than a coal fired power station.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is interesting, and so it will be interesting to see what happens over the next few years in Australia. I do think we might have the chance of actually getting nuclear power stations for the first time.
Yeah.
So that's probably all I had on nuclear. I guess.
Sure.
I guess.
Was it mainly just because it's topical that we brought this up? It just kind of on the buzz in the Australian news or something?
Yeah, I think it was a few weeks ago I made a note of it. That was part of it. I think there may be. I also the fact I recently watched Chernobyl, I think was part of the other reason I decided to talk about it. But the main point, the main takeaway I want everyone to have is to look into breeder reactors, understand what they are, how they work, the pros and the cons, and ask yourself why, whenever we're talking about nuclear waste, this topic is not mentioned in the media because they're really not. They'll say things like, "There's no solution to there's no solution to." The problem of storage of nuclear waste. Well, there is a solution. You might not like the solution and you may be able to make valid arguments against it, but that's not the same thing as saying there isn't a solution, which they will routinely say.
Right. I wonder actually if the Simpsons are not a bit complicit in the in a bit of the panic because Homer Simpson works in a nuclear power plant and things tend to go. There was this whole episode about a core meltdown about to happen, which ultimately didn't because I think Homer Simpson accidentally prevented it or something of that line. But I wonder if that hasn't seeped into the public consciousness a bit.
Yeah, you're probably right. I was gulping water a little bit then. Didn't mean to start coughing.
Don't
Excuse me.
don't worry about it.
Yes, I haven't watched The Simpsons much in recent years. I used to enjoy the early episodes, and I think I think even in the early episodes there was something like that. And I do remember something about one episode, excuse me, where Homer was working from home, and he had a little bird. It was sort of some sort of water mechanism, and the bird could tap down, and he had to hit enter on the keyboard repeatedly, and he just got the bird to do it. Just some sort of automated process. And he went off and did something else. So I think that may have nearly caused a meltdown as well. So
Right. Yeah. I haven't watched it in ages. And even then, it was obviously the early episodes. I think the most recent episodes are unwatchable, was my general feel on that one. But even then, they were really, really biased towards left, and they don't give the right a fair shake at all. So you know where the biases are on that one. So I kind of got tired
yeah,
of it. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. It's the entertainment industry to a large degree, isn't it? Yes.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So the third topic I have is an Australian woman by the name of Nicola Anabel Tio. I recently found out about Miss Tio, and I would just like to talk a little bit about what happened. So Nicola Anabel Tio is an Australian woman who in 2019 was charged with 4 offences, including dangerous driving, occasionally grievous bodily harm. Police had alleged that in September 2019, a car being driven by Tio had hit a man near the town of Wiseman's Ferry in the state of New South Wales. The man was placed in an induced coma and then spent 3 months in intensive care. Tio had pleaded not guilty. Media reports suggest that Tio's defence would be based on automatism. I think I pronounced that correctly. Automatism, a rare defence in which it is claimed a person acts involuntarily. Tio's trial was due to begin on the 20th of June 2021. On 22 June 2021, the prosecution announced that the case would be dismissed. The prosecution declined to discuss the reasons for the dismissal. And that's it. They simply chose not to prosecute. Now, notably, Tio is the second eldest daughter of a well-known Australian surgeon, Charlie Tio, and the man who was allegedly hit by Tio's car was reportedly a notorious former bikie. Now, I stress Miss Tio has not been convicted of anything because the prosecution elected not to prosecute her days before she was due to go to trial. I think the state owes everyone an explanation as to what happened there.
Right.
Why was Miss Tio not taken to trial? If they believe that a reasonable prospect of conviction, then normally they have to have a reasonable prospect of conviction in order to be able to go to trial. They must have believed that in order to go to trial, and yet 6 days before they just simply drop it, which is legal. The prosecution is entitled to do that, but it is fairly unusual to do it just before trial in this manner. And yeah, I really think that the prosecution should explain themselves. And again, I stress that Ms. Tio has not been convicted of anything in relation to this incident.
I haven't even heard of automatism. But so
Neither had
someone
I.
not guilty by reason of acting involuntarily.
Yes, yes. I have to say I'd say I'm reasonably well read on the law and so forth as not as any of the professional capacity, but as an amateur, and I had never come across this before. And it did say, all the sources said, a rare defense. Yep.
Mm.
Perhaps for some reason they thought she had a fair case of successfully using that as a defense. But in any case, I do think that some sort of explanation should be given. I don't think it's appropriate that they should drop it and not offer an explanation
So
to the
if I were more of a cynic than I am, I'm already looking at two of these aspects here. She's a daughter of someone wealthy, so influence could have played a part in it. I don't know how corrupt, and to what extent the corruption is in Australian court. But
it's supposed to be low.
Supposed to
Anyway,
be, yeah, but who knows, But and so a he's just a biker gang guy, right?
exactly. That's right.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
The person who spent 3 months in hospital is he is known to be a former bikie, and his name is Jock Ross. Now, my feeling is the fact that he was a known bikie figure is probably not related to it. I think that's probably just a
Okay.
coincidence. That's my feeling anyway. Not related to the fact that the prosecution was dropped.
Okay, yeah, yeah, because I was about to say, once again, if I were more cynical than I am, this might have taken apart into this one.
Well,
But
that's
that
my
was a complete coincidence, right? The fact that it was this person that was hit.
Yeah, who happened to be a known figure in Australia. Exactly, that's right. Yeah,
Mhm.
my feeling is it's not related. It's not related to why the legal process took that decision, but nevertheless, it is of course notable to mention.
Mhm.
Yep. So anyway, yeah, I just think that's quite interesting, and I've recently came across this case. I didn't. I mean, it was in June 2021, so we were well into the pandemic by that point, and I personally didn't even remember it occurring. I came across it about a month ago, and I just thought I'd mention it. So again, I stress, Ms. Tio has not been convicted of anything in relation to this incident. The case, all the charges against her were dismissed about 6 days before her trial.
Mhm.
The only other, well, apart from obviously Zoe McClellan, the only other one I have that I want to mention is I just want to remind everybody. Could have tacked this on. I'd like to talk about this a little bit more in more detail later, but I just want to remind everybody because a lot of people don't know that first wave feminism was tied up with eugenics in the UK. Okay, of course, so those who don't know, so I guess probably a little bit of explanation is important. Eugenics is a pseudoscience. There you go. There's a legitimate use of pseudoscience. Eugenics is a pseudoscience in which it was believed that you could essentially breed humans in the same manner that one might breed pedigree dogs and make better humans. Yeah. In actual fact, it's now, given what we now know about chromosomes and genes and so forth, it's pretty much the opposite of what you want to do because you really want genetic diversity in the species in order to strengthen it. So they probably would have ended up with humans with all sorts of genetic diseases and so forth, the way that pedigree dogs do.
Right.
Anyway, yeah, early feminists were very much tied up with eugenics in the UK. And also, too, it's worth noting that the UK was the centre of eugenics, interest in eugenics. It existed elsewhere here in Australia, North America, but it was primarily the UK. And the Nazis actually are known to have drawn a lot of their ideology from eugenics. Adolf Hitler actually mentions it in Mein Kampf. So they actually took that on board, and that was the reason they would, sterilize people and so forth. So Yeah, anyway, so it's worth mentioning that eugenics, yeah, did influence the Nazis. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's 100% proven. They
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah.
did that. They did it themselves. Yeah,
You
they
can't
said it
deny that if
themselves.
you tried. Yeah. So.
No, exactly. That's right. Yeah. So anyways, I just want to remind everybody that first wave feminists were heavily tied up with eugenics in the UK in the 1920s. Around about the same time, first wave feminists in the US were actively involved with the KKK as well. So
Mhm.
just remember that this was feminism in the 1920s and 1930s. So it's not like there are a lot of people who believe the early feminists were had the right had a good had just were honest people and so forth and just looking for betterment of women, maybe betterment of white women, but they were yeah, there was a
Mhm.
lot of racism in early feminism. Anyway,
Absolutely.
just thought I'd mention so, and then we'll get on. I think I'd like to get on to Margaret Sanger in another episode as well, but I'll leave
Well,
her for
that's
another.
that's the big thing that came up in my mind when it comes to this one.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not so much breeding, much more exterminating, but it's a form of eugenics nonetheless, I think.
Isn't it?
Mhm.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So I
Right.
think this is probably one for next in more depth in the next episode.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah.
And more on eugenics as pseudoscience. So any given person that thinks that could keep bloodlines pure is probably guilty of this one. Like anyone who tries to, well, like even aristocratic sentiment that has them marry within their own families, that kind of sentiment,
Yeah.
that's in their mind, that's eugenics too. So
Mhm.
it's a bit of
Well,
a,
that's true.
yeah, yeah,
A more, yeah,
right.
an earlier form of it, I suppose you could say.
I
Yeah.
suppose, yeah, yeah, obviously disastrous, but
Mm.
in their minds, that's what they're trying to do, mostly in the form of keeping the outside genes out, and
Yes.
and keeping
And
it in the
well,
family, as it were. So,
we know what that did to European monarchy, who were all closely
mhm.
related.
Yes.
Tsar Nikolai's son was obviously a hemophiliac, and you had people very close to the royal family, the British royal family, uh, with mental illnesses and so forth, and
Mhm.
limited intelligence, and so forth. In fact, as interestingly enough, if you haven't seen it. The Crown is a great series, and even though I consider myself quite well read on history, there were a number of stories presented particularly in the early episodes of The Crown, that I wasn't aware of. It's really interesting, and it really does kind of dig the dirt on the British royal family. And they actually have an episode on this, on a
Uh,
couple of members of the royal family who were actually the royal family paid for them to be in a top facility and so forth, but basically hushed it all up, so nobody knew that they had these two members of the family who needed special care.
mhm.
They didn't want anyone to know. But yeah, and it was interesting. Apparently, the two women actually kept a photo of the royal family near them in this facility in their beds, and would tell people they were related to the royal family, and nobody would believe them. And then it eventually came out, and it was discovered and ended up in the papers. But yes, anyway, so a lot of problems in including haemophilia in European royal families because they're all so closely related.
Right.
So I've gone through a few different topics there. Did you have anything, Vernon, that you
I think I
wanted
have
to?
one thing to round off before we have to kind of close things off.
Yep.
Um, no real reason that I kind of thought of this one. It's just been kind of I watch movies, and this I kind of allow myself to stir in some questions. So we know, so we in the men's movement talk a lot about the dangers of romantic love, right?
Mm,
Basically, basically the idea of courtship, and the whole going down your knees thing is actually very undignified for men, and romantic love generally results in uh, damage to the man's life later on because of divorce, rape, and so forth. And there's a lot of talk about that one, but you know but I'm also not saying that passion should be uh completely out of the picture, just because we
mm,
don't like romantic love. So I'm actually kind of, this is more like I'm putting forth a discussion topic more
mm.
than I have a definite solution. Is there a replacement for romantic love that is not just, the what I think is the banality of the whole arranged marriage solution and so forth. Basically, is there like a proper alternative for that? And can we depict that well in fiction? Like arranged marriage is not going to be exciting as fiction, but
Yeah, you're right.
yeah. But
Yeah.
so is there still a room for passion and more of a one-on-one basis for pair bonding? And is there a way to do that in fiction that actually makes it worthwhile to read and to
Well,
watch and so forth? It's a
yeah,
weird
that's it.
question, I know,
That's
but
an interesting question. So I would say that a lot of people who are married a long time say that that early passionate love is replaced by a different sort of love, which is more based on admiration and connection and so forth. And I think that's
right.
certainly very valid.
Yeah.
And whether or not that would be, very exciting in fiction, I don't know. It would be a separate
Yeah.
issue question, but I certainly think that's there. But it is quite different to that early flush of passion and infatuation and so forth. So,
Right.
but yeah, but could someone write a story based around that sort of longer term love?
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like once again, do away with the simping, get off your knees kind of a thing. Don't
Yes.
kowtow to her, uh, not even just her every whim, even one whim.
Yeah,
So,
it's a
it's
love of equals, and it's based on reciprocity, where you
mhm,
may do something for her, she does something for you. That's a relationship of equals.
mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to mention Zoe McClellan before we go. So I guess that what you're saying there is you basically presented that as a question for everybody.
I
And
suppose so. Like it's been on
yeah,
my mind, and I think it's worthwhile to kind of think about it because, uh, mostly because there's too much romance out there that's bad. Like movies, it's especially horrible. Like there's a lot of what is in real life self-destructive horseshit out there that you dare not repeat, but some kind of do, and
yeah,
it's no good. But you still gotta watch movies, So
yeah.
like you don't want to write all relationships off.
Well, I
Uh,
do a pretty good job of not watching movies, to be fair, but
well, you know what I mean. Like if this isn't a movie you enjoy, you don't stop it just because you're not
yes.
not not into the whole romantic love thing.
Yes,
Right.
I know what you mean there. It might actually be a good movie and you want to enjoy the movie. Yes,
Right. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Even
I
if
know
it
it's
is like
weird. I
chivalry.
know it's weird, but I figured it's something to worth kind of thinking
No,
about and
it's
maybe improving our fiction a bit.
yeah. I think it's actually an interesting question for people to ponder. Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. I think we've got a few minutes. All right. I'm just going to do my spiel on Zoe.
Let's do
Cool.
it.
As of September 2024, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McClellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McClellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing in the area. McClellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington State, and may have returned to the area. Some sources believe that McClellan has left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McClellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. And I want to add one final point to that. I happen to know some fluent Spanish speakers, and I've asked their assistance. We are going to start reaching out in Costa Rica in Spanish and make the peaceful people of Costa Rica aware that McClellan is wanted. Because if she is there, maybe someone's seen her. That's all I have.
Yep. That's all we got. Got a short episode today, but I think a good one.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Yep. 2 weeks. Catch you then.
Bye.
Bye.